I'm going to open the conference by talking about something that we all know a lot about, job search. And it's joined with Jason, Andy, and Georgia. So as you all know, job-to-job transitions are an important feature of the US labor market, with almost half of the jobs being filled by people who already have jobs. And not surprisingly, on the job search is at the center of search and matching models, and it is an important driver of reallocation and wage growth in the models that we typically run. Yet, we know very little about the extent and nature of on-the-job search. There is no representative survey since 1980s, and the current population survey that we always use only collect information on job search activities of the unemployed. So what we do is we come in here and we design a special survey on job search. And we use the infrastructure of New York Fed Survey of Consumer Expectations to repeatedly field the survey every October starting in 2013. So the survey is as old as my second grader, and we're still counting. So after designing and fielding this, what we did is we examined the job search behavior of the employed and non-employed in detail. So we essentially opened up this big box, big black box of on-the-job search. So I'm going to show you tons of statistics about effort and how effort relates to outcomes, such as job offers and job offer characteristics. So this is a very rich data set, and lots of people started using it for related labor market questions. I'm going to focus on two implications today. One is the importance of on-the-job search effort as an amplification of business cycle shocks. The second is the distributional consequences. I'll show you some preliminary work on gender differences in job search effort and outcomes. So even though there are various facts that we documented, I want to center my presentation around three main facts. So the first one is on-the-job search is pervasive, and it's more intense at the lower rungs of the job ladder. And I'm going to give you a detailed description of what I mean by job ladder. And the second is search is more efficient when you already have a job. Employed are about 4 times more efficient in generating offers than the unemployed. And if you just look at transition rates, you would conclude the opposite is true. And not only employed are more efficient, they also tend to receive higher quality job offers. So if I just look at raw differentials, the wage offer premium for the employed is around 44%. And controlling for a very rich set of observables reduces this by half, but there's still a 20% wage offer premium to searching when you are employed. So these are the 3 facts that I want to highlight today, and then I want to talk about their implications. So the first implication is what I mentioned, the macroeconomic implication. When you have a shock that affects the labor market, there is a responsiveness of on-the-job search effort. And what we show is that this is quite elastic. People's on-the-job search decision responds a lot to changes in the economic environment. And as a result, when there's a negative shock or a positive shock, it amplifies the effect of this shock. And then this is more persistent than the shock because the distribution of workers over the job ladder changes only slowly as they move up the ladder when the economy gets better. And then there's the gender differences, which is a separate but interesting issue. What I'll show you is that differences in on-the-job search behavior and outcomes contribute to systematic gender differences in labor market outcomes. So on-the-job search is a very powerful tool. It makes you go up the ladder, and also there's high return to being employed. And since there are differences in the way on-the-job search works along the gender margin, this is likely to create persistent differences going forward in people's careers. So let me briefly give you the description of the data before I go over these facts in detail. So the New York Fed has a monthly survey of consumer expectations, that's mostly designed to elicit information about macroeconomic and household level expectations. And it's very well designed. It matches demographics, labor force transitions from the CPS very well. So this is what we are using as our infrastructure. But what we are doing is we are fielding our annual survey every October, starting from 2013. So even though our survey is annual, we still have a little bit of a panel dimension because there's this monthly survey that's at the background of our survey methodology. And our survey, as I mentioned, mostly focuses on job search activity, and the questions are very carefully designed by us. And the other thing is that we have what we typically have in the current population survey. So we can easily compare and contrast our results with the current population survey. Our full sample is the pool sample of these 5 years. It's around 4,500 observations. And then I have a subsample of around 1,000 people who received a job offer within the last 6 months. As you know, in typical surveys, it's very hard to observe job offers. What we typically observe is the realized transitions from unemployment to employment or between jobs. So let's look at the first fact, which is related to job search behavior. There's a lot of on-the-job search in the economy. And it's more intense if you are trying to move up the job ladder. So let's first look at the extensive margin by employment status. These are employed people, unemployed, and not in the labor force. So our definition of unemployment is a bit more generous. What we did is we broadened the definition so that there's not much of a search left among the non-participants. As you know, this is a critique of the current population survey, that there are still people who flow into employment from non-participation at a very high rate because they actually want a job. So when we look at how much on the job search there is on the extensive margin, among employed, around 22% reported looking for a job in the last 4 weeks. This might seem quite high, but if you look in detail, around 9% are actually looking for additional jobs. So this is one fact of the US labor market. There are lots of workers who try to patch through different jobs or who are always on the lookout for additional jobs to make a decent living. And around half of this search activity is about that. It's not really about climbing the job ladder. And then our survey, the way we design questions, allows us to double check if this is a reasonable number, because we also asked about search time. So if you look at other definitions of search, percent with positive search time in the last week, we get a very similar number. And also, if you actually ask them whether they applied for a vacancy or not in the last month, again, we get a very similar number. So our conclusion from that is there's actually quite a bit of on-the-job search activity among the employed in the extensive margin. So if you look at the intensive margin, how much time they are spending searching, again, by labor force status. So this is the average hour search for the unemployed, but remember, all of them are searching. It's around 9 hours. For employed, the average is around an hour a week. However, we can ask further questions to employed. Not all of them are searching. There are lots of them. The ones that say they're looking for new search actually spend around half of the time that the unemployed searchers are spending. And in terms of applications, there you see that there's a very similar picture that employed are sending about, on average, 1 application a month, while for unemployed, it's around 8.5. So then why are people searching? So one possibility is that on-the-job search is about trying to line up a job if you know that you're going to lose your job. So this changes the meaning of what we are trying to measure. So that's why we ask detailed questions about the reason of search for employed people. Not satisfied with pay and benefits, job duties, and not making use of skills and experience are the top 3 reasons. And when we asked them, are you searching because you were given advance notice, this was only a small fraction of them. So this suggests that on the job search is a mean to climb up the ladder, to get to better opportunities. So now, how can we look at this? How can we position people on the job ladder and then check if the ones who are below are indeed searching hard, which is the main idea of all these job ladder models that we are used to looking at. So what we do is we rank people by their residualized wages. Why residualized wage? So I compare everybody with their peers, same age, gender, marital status, education, and occupation. So being on the low end of the distribution means that your salary, your wage is lower than people who look like you. And then we looked at how job search effort varies by this residualized wage. And this is what we get. As you can see, these are people who are below median residualized wage, and they search about 2 hours. While we look at these people, it's less than an hour. So there's indeed this negative relationship between your hourly residualized wage and hours of search. And the same applies to number of applications if I use a different measure. If you are below, you're sending about 1.5 applications. If you are lucky to be above, you're sending about 1/3 of those applications. So we think that this is an important finding, because even though we are used to these job ladder models where you are using your search effort to climb up the ladder, there wasn't any systematic evidence that links effort to the position on the job ladder. So this is our first fact. Now let's look at outcomes. People are searching, what are they getting? So what I'll try to establish is that employed are more efficient, about 4 times. Okay, that requires looking at offers. So again, I'm looking at everything by labor force status. Offer rate is way higher for unemployed, but remember, they're also putting in more effort. However, this is not enough, because I remember giving talks where I talk about search effort, and lots of economists told me, oh, I get an offer when I give a seminar, it doesn't matter. Right? So that's why we ask about unsolicited offers. So this is an offer that you get without contacting the employer, so that we get to this idea that some people just attract offers. And what we find is that this happens to people regardless of their employment status. There's about 3 to 4% rate. And the interesting thing about this is, even though the rates are similar, there are lots of employed people in the economy. So a lot of offers, actually, a lot of unsolicited offers are going to people who already have jobs and who are not looking for jobs. And then the other thing is that, remember when we were looking for jobs when we were at grad school, we always pursued every possible offer. But now we are more selective because we think that this is not a good match, or this is not where I want to move. So there are some unrealized offers as well that might affect your efficiency. So we asked people again, was there an indication that you could get an offer that you did not pursue? And we call them unrealized offers. And if you look at that, once you add these unrealized offers to the employed, you see that their offer rate goes up by 50%, because they seem to be censoring offers at a higher rate than unemployed workers whose offer rate only goes up by 10%. So
can you repeat what is unrealized offers? Is an offers that
unrealized offer is an indication that you get from an employer that there might be an offer that you decide not to pursue. Okay? So they tell you, are you interested?
You didn't get the offer, just that you know
you
that
didn't
you
get
would
the
have
offer,
got the offer, but I see.
But we take that into account because that affects your efficiency in generating offers. Again, the reason we do that is we think employed people are directing their search better, and they are censoring a higher fraction of their offers because they are already they already have a position on the ladder, while for unemployed, it's different. And that's what we see in our data, that the offer rate, once we include these unrealized ones, go up by 50% for employed workers.
But you ask them, how do you measure this unrealized offer? You ask them if they think. Okay.
Yeah, we asked them, like, was there any indication that you would get an offer that you did not pursue? And this is way more common for employed workers. And unsolicited offers are the one that we're sitting here and somebody makes us an offer. So these were, I think these questions were all motivated by all the discussions that I heard in search and matching workshops. And the other important margin is that, remember that what we only know, if we don't look at this data, is job-to-job transition rate and the job finding rate. But these are functions of acceptance rate, which might also vary by the employment status. So we also calculated the acceptance rates, and not surprisingly for employed, acceptance rate is less than unemployed workers. So now let me put all this together and tell you how I arrived at the conclusion that employed are more efficient. So the way we calibrate our models typically is we say, this is the job finding rate, this is the job-to-job transition rate. So then unemployed must be around 7 times more efficient than the unemployed, because this is the transition that I observe in the data. But I've shown you many margins. But first of all, transition rate is not the offer rate. It's multiplied by the acceptance rate, which varies by employment status. So if I take that into account and I look at offer rates, this difference already becomes 4. Still unemployed more efficient, but 4 times, because their transition rates are higher due to their higher acceptance rates. Now let me introduce unrealized offers. So these are offers that you work for, but then you say, okay, I'm not going to pursue these ones. And then let's think about unrealized offers as offers that we get without any search effort. And if I make that calculation, now I'm at 3.4. But I did not take into account the search effort differential. Search effort is way higher for unemployed workers. If I look at offer rate per effort, per unit of effort, I find that unemployed are actually way less efficient than employed. Actually, instead of the unemployed being around 7 times more efficient, what I find is that employed search is 4 times more efficient than the unemployed. I'm not going to talk a lot about this today because of time constraints, but this finding actually resolves the wage dispersion puzzle in the search literature.
You have 5 minutes.
Okay. So let me move on to job offer characteristics. The employed receive higher quality job offers than the non-employed. So now I'm going to use this question that asks people about the offers that they received in the last 6 months. And one thing I see is that if I look at hourly wage, employed workers are offered higher wages. So these are in log points, it's about 44%. And if I look at their prior wages, it's actually way smaller. And controlling for observables reduces this gap by half, even though it reduces the differential in prior wage to basically 0. So in our paper, we actually show that part of this is due to unobserved heterogeneity, while the other part is censoring of lower offers by the employer. However, controlling for observables, there is still a big wage premium to being employed when you are searching. Now let's move on to macroeconomic implications. So for that, obviously you need an on-the-job search model. Our search model has everything that you want, these differentials, search efficiency that we discussed. It also has a convex search cost function. And this parameter here is an important one because it governs how responsive search effort is when macroeconomic conditions change. And I have valuable information from the survey because I have the search effort wage gradient. So I see how when search effort responds when return to search changes by placing people on the job ladder. So essentially, I calibrate my model to fit this gradient. And what I find is that search effort is actually way more elastic than typically assumed in the literature. The literature, due to lack of evidence from this parameter, assumes a quadratic cost function. However, what we uncover is that this margin is like some sort of labor supply elasticity, if you will, because this is the first step of labor supply, is way more elastic than you would get when you just assume a quadratic cost function. And what's the implication of this? Let me show you by showing you a bad recession, which is kind of like the COVID recession, where there's a big increase in the separation rate and there's a big decline in matching efficiency. And look at what happens to job transition rates. So what I find is that if search effort does not respond, there's only a small decline in job transition rates. However, with the elasticity that we uncover, job search effort declines substantially more. And moreover, there's more persistence, because what happens is when the shock disappears after 6 months, a lot of workers who lost their jobs move up the ladder only slowly, and they search very hard to move up and to go back to their previous positions that they had. As a result, even though the shock ends in 6 months, even after a year, the economy is still responding to this shock. So on the job search effort amplifies, as you can see, the effect of the recession and the shock by around 100% relative to what we used to assume.
We have 1 minute.
Okay, let me quickly look at gender differences. I have shown you on the job search is very efficient. It's very effective. So access to this and on the job search effort is likely to have important effects. Women search harder. You can see 25% versus 18%. And even in terms of hours and in terms of applications, women put more effort in on the job search. However, they have lower returns from search. They have a lower offer rate, but most interestingly, they also get unsolicited offers at a lower rate. And they are offered a lower wage, which disappears if you control for observables. But this does not mean that there is no difference in accepted wages, because women also seem to be accepting offers at a higher rate. And there are also other margins in addition to wages where we see these differences. Lower hours, fraction of offers without benefits being much higher, and also this interesting finding that around 18% of women got unsolicited offers, while for men, this was around 30%. So this is something that we are exploring to see how it affects the gender wage gaps that we observe, especially as people's careers evolve and they come to their mid-careers. In terms of concluding remarks, I hope I conveyed that on the job search is very, very important, and it has both important macroeconomic effects. It serves as an amplification mechanism, and it also has important distributional consequences due to search effort and outcomes being different. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have Claudia as the discussant.
All right, okay, so thank you. This is a great paper. I'm really excited to discuss this. I do want to say again to the organizers, this is an excellent conference. I'm so happy you went forward with this, even though our entire world turned upside down. And this is an excellent set of papers by a bunch of scholars who happen to be women. So this is a lot of fun to be here. Okay, so just real quickly, the motivation for this paper, job search intensity, job search in general is very important for labor market dynamics. I want to underscore how important it is, and we've talked a lot about job ladders. Job ladders have been absolutely smashed and decimated in the last several months, and I do want to affirm this investigation by gender, because we know that some of the sectors, particularly in services, which have many women that work in them, many women of color, like these are places where not only do we see incredibly large increases in unemployment, those are sectors that have not recovered to the same extent. So I think this is really important. I mean, we need to get these job search models and figure out what's good and bad about them, but like the world needs to know this research, so keep going. Okay, and so the big extension here is to think about the job-to-job translations. So people who are working and move into another job, we have heard this is an important piece of the churn we see in the labor market, and the data on this job search, despite the fact that it is important among the unemployed, the data have not been available. So this all makes sense. This is an important paper. Okay, so the main findings, and this is a little bit findings and contributions. So creating a new survey, collecting data, and looking at both the employed and the unemployed. So the employed, this data is new. As you can tell from the presentation we just heard, they were extremely careful in collecting the data in a way that it really fits the kind of discussions that we've been having for years in the job search literature. So this is really important. It's a public service and a good that a lot of other researchers can use. This is super. Okay. So an important finding here is, well, first of all, we need to remember the search is common among employees, and I think importantly, we're thinking about where it is in the wage distribution, like who's searching more, who's working harder on the job to find another job or an additional job. Again, this is very timely in terms of understanding this recession and how we get out of it and get people back on their feet. And interestingly, and it's important to think about effort, the amount of time you put into it to get the same reward. So this focus on greater search efficiency is an important thing we need to think about, and how that differs across characteristics like your wage rate, your gender, race, etc. Okay, so to go through some comments here, this is kind of a big picture question, and I think like you get at it, but again, to reinforce, like setting the findings that you have here in search on the business cycle dynamics. I mean, you are deep into the job search literature, these models, they've been used as a workhorse model for like everything under the sun. But I think you have research and findings that is so important for what we're trying to understand, like always in labor market dynamics, macro stabilization. So to me, that's the more compelling framing, but like I'm a macro forecaster and not a job search academic researcher. So that's a little bit my bias. And I think this is where, and you start to, like there's simulations later in the paper, and there have just been a lot of puzzles that we still had, or like some people have explanations, but I think frankly, they're still puzzles. So something like why late into the last expansion did we still not see the wage growth? And, there's been, and like not just wage growth, quality of wages and jobs. I feel like you've got the machinery here to point it at some puzzles that we had going into the COVID crisis. And I'm sure like there are things you can do as we move out and see job ladders improving, not improving, all this stuff. So one of the things that I found interesting, and I'm a little, maybe I misunderstood it, and if I understood it, I'm still a little puzzled. So it seems, you go into the data and you find this difference by search outcomes, like quality of the wage offer and that kind of thing. And some of it's the decision-making of the employee versus unemployed. But like, it almost reads to me like a really, really important indicator of search outcomes is, are you working or not? Right? And we have a period, and this is true in different parts of the business cycle. You have people that move very rapidly from being employed to unemployed. And so like, I guess I still want to, like, you're establishing empirical facts that didn't exist. So yay, you all. But I feel like there's a lot of questions, or at least I have questions about what the mechanism is. And I think it's different if there's something about like on your resume being able to say, I have a job. And if you can't say that, there's some potentially just unknowable about you that sets you back. Because you do talk about observables, but I think it just felt like there's a lot of power coming from, are you working, are you not? And we flip that on and off pretty fast sometimes. And I do, okay. So like you have a limited sample size, but like your survey, and so you pool it for very good reasons, but you are covering like a labor market that was really moving in a good way, as opposed to what we've seen since March. But in 2013, the labor market was still in a pretty tough spot, you know, and by 2017, things had gotten a lot better. So I wonder, like, it feels to me like there ought to be some interaction between the business cycle conditions and the search, especially the like benefits to search. And I just think that's something that could be explored, but that may be like beyond this paper, beyond this data. Okay. Okay, so I have used the survey of consumer expectations. I will completely second the fact that this is a survey that could be used more. It's also a survey where, at least in the past, they've been open to like people fielding modules, like you have to pay for it. But there is time on the survey. It is a very interesting, flexible design. The folks at the New York Fed that have designed this and run this are like super creative. So this is an opportunity to have a sandbox. Like thoughtfully, you all can write questions, right? And that's absolutely what we've seen in this paper. Now, the survey,
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay, the survey, and I'm almost done. The survey of expectations has some warts and issues. I felt like in table 1, there were some differences between like some of just the summary statistics across the two that, I don't know. I mean, this is not a problem with your paper. It's just, this is tough with these kind of online surveys. So, but you know, the data you have is way, way better than what we'd had before. Okay, some of these are a little more minor. I think you could walk through a little bit more how what you're doing in terms of measuring search intensity differs from what's been done with the CPS. You could just walk us through, anytime you go and design a new survey and you ask people like what they're doing and what they think, you got a mountain to climb there. Like people will think much more highly of CPS, but I think you can do this. It just helped to walk it through a little more. I think, especially because your results are so important down at the bottom of the wage distribution, that's where people really, it's not about having one employer. People piece together a lot of different types of employment. And I wonder if by only really being able to look at one piece of their employment, which is often what the CPS picks up, you're like, something's going on that you might want to unpack, especially because the low wage are so important to your search results. Unobservables, yeah, that's the thing, right? I don't, some of these differences, like what is it exactly? But I mean, you go through the exercise. This is a little bit, there's some of this, like the value of being employed and the search efficiency. Like there were some places where I got a little bit confused about what's driving, but those are, I can send you those. Okay, so I do, like, this is excellent. There's new data. There are other surveys out there, household surveys that were started about the same time. So the board, the Federal Reserve Board, runs a survey of household economics and decision-making. It has a different way of looking at employment. It does have some search measures, nowhere near as comprehensive, but it's much larger and you can do more demographics. You've looked at gender. There's all kinds of stuff obviously going on in the labor market in terms of outcomes and affecting dynamics. So, okay, so great paper, lots to do. I think there's a lot that's very relevant to today and understand the business cycle. And the closing thought is applause. Oh my God, you created new data. And this is hard and I applaud you. So, okay, thanks.
Thank you, Claudia. This is a really great discussion. I want to show something quickly, very related to what Claudia just discussed, if it's possible. It's about these differences that she was talking about. I mean, observables are not everything. And one thing she said is it matters what you did, if you worked. So actually in this survey, we asked people what they have done in the last 5 years. And when we control for their employment history, the fraction of time that they were employed in the last 5 years, we could reduce this gap quite a bit. And if you also put in the fraction of time that they were at school, you can see that one third of the gap actually disappears. But again, this doesn't really answer the big question of why employment is important. What I'm telling you is employment history is even more persistent. So I wanted to add that she's right on spot in terms of these differences. And the other thing is that we try to do everything residualized, but we are digging deeper in terms of how observables correlate with job search effort, and gender was one example. And it's true, for example, that younger people search harder because they are by definition on the lower ranks of the job ladder. So this is definitely something that we are exploring. The other is the business cycle implication. I mean, the COVID shock, the search effort behaved exactly like in the example that I've shown you. Search effort tanked, and now we are seeing people dropping out of the job ladder. And most likely we are going to see this effort, which is going to be persistent, to climb up the ladder. This wasn't designed to capture the COVID recession, but there's some similarity in the way that we designed it.
Yeah, I was just going to quickly touch upon another point Claudia made, and kind of, also say she was spot on. And in terms of the low end of the job ladder, Aysegul didn't have too much time to talk about it, but we in terms of the search effort, not only is on-the-job search pervasive, but we find quite a bit of search among people looking for additional work. This is something that's not really addressed in job search models, but we're finding it in the data. And when we look at those guys a lot more deeply, I mean, they're precisely what we normally think of as part-time for economic reasons or underemployed. So I just quickly wanted to say, yes, we look at it a little bit. We don't pursue it too much in this paper, but clearly search behavior of people at the low end of the job ladder is interesting in aspects that these search models aren't quite capturing, but it's showing up in our data.
I have a question, if I may.
Yes, of course.
Yes, so I thought very nice, Aysegul, super innovative, very, very interesting. I just wanted to ask a little bit more, following up on Jason's comment on those people who who are employed but are searching for more jobs just to patch up their income. So I'm wondering whether the geographic aspect matters here too. So you are already employed, you're located in some city, and you just need to find other jobs to kind of patch up your income. So how does that geographic component, in principle, you might not be able to just move to multiple places to hold all those jobs. How that affects the probability of actually finding out how much you search relative to somebody who is unemployed, who's going to probably search more broadly.
So we don't ask about whether they are looking in the same location, but we ask them how much they are willing to commute. And then we see gender differences along that dimension, for example, that men are more open to commuting longer. But we haven't really thought about this possibility that if you're in a depressed area, maybe trying to patch up additional jobs is harder for you than somebody who is in a growing area. So it's something we can definitely look at. So we use this idea to calculate how much hours slack or hours underutilization in the labor market is. So we counted these people as 0.2 or 0.3 of the unemployed because they still want to work more. And what we found is that it was way more persistent than the unemployment rate, something that Claudia also brought up after the end of the recession.
Great. I see a question from the audience from Brenda. Brenda, I'm going to allow you to talk so you can ask the question live. Can you try to unmute yourself?
Hi.
Perfect. Hi.
Hi, thank you. So yeah, I had a question. It was just related to Claudia's point on what is the mechanism. And I was wondering whether you have any data on the channels through which individuals search. So perhaps employed individuals just have access to a more efficient mechanism of search than unemployed individuals do, and that's what drives the difference. And second, can you observe any difference in search efforts as unemployment duration or employment tenure changes? And maybe that can tell us something about whether, is it the fact that you're unemployed that makes you less efficient at search, or is it the fact that you have been unemployed for a long time that causes the difference?
So the most efficient form of search is an unsolicited offer, obviously. And it seems like there's some variation in the rate that people get unsolicited offers by their demographic characteristics, but it doesn't look like it's by employment status in our data. So that's by far the most efficient way. You just sit and then you just get an offer. And in terms of your second question, we did not look at the data by unemployment duration because of the sample size. But now we have 7 years of data, and as we get more, I think we'll be able to look at that. And in terms of employment tenure, those are all residualized, but we can definitely look at all those and the effect of those observables.
Yeah, so I'll just add to that. You know, and stuff that's not in the paper, we've looked at it in the background. And roughly speaking, for example, the tenure stuff, we by tenure, we see search effort goes down. We haven't looked at too much of the efficiency, but at least effort goes down, which makes sense if you think higher tenured people are higher up on the job ladder, which is the search related to the search wage gradient Aysegul showed. And by search methods, we have specific search methods. And like Aysegul said, unsolicited offers are the most prevalent thing. They're comparable, but seem to be somewhat more effective for the employed. We think as a percent of total offers that came unsolicited. And we do see somewhat greater shares in terms of search methods or how the offer came about. We have information on that. And you see a little bit more in terms of networking and referrals that matter for the employed versus the unemployed.
Can I ask you, hi everybody, can I ask you 2 quick questions, but I can wait for sure.
There was a raised hand from the audience by Valerie Remy, and then we'll ask Elena's question, and then we don't have any more time. Okay, Valerie, let me try to unmute you. There you go. Here you go. You should be able to unmute yourself. Yes.
Sorry, that was a mistake. I want to say what a great paper it is, but I'd accidentally clicked it when I didn't mean to, so I will let other people ask questions.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
So, Elena.
Thank you. So a quick question to both Aysegul and Jason. So I wanted to ask if you could comment more on the importance of the curvature or the cost of the effort cost function. And why does it matter that it's more convex than the typical quadratic? It doesn't matter more at low and high level of effort for your results. And the second related question is in measuring efficiency, of course, having good measures of the input, the search input is very important. And so I was wondering whether you can comment on your confidence on those measures.
So, I mean, I think this elasticity is important, exactly why the labor supply elasticity is important, right? Because it shows us that job search effort is responsive to what's happening in the aggregate economy, and then it amplifies the importance of shocks. And if there are differences in this cost search function by, say, demographics, by gender, by age, this is going to affect the recovery from the aggregate shocks. So we see it as like the first step of labor supply elasticity. How much you are responding to changes in the economy by changing your search behavior, because we link search behavior to search outcomes and wage growth. So that's why we think that it has important macroeconomic implications. I mean, this is similar to the idea, and Jan Eckhouden is in Lindenlaub's paper. They show that this is an important mechanism, and we are showing that we are putting a number essentially saying that, look, this is even more elastic than we think it was. So it's likely to be an important amplification mechanism when we have shocks in the labor market.